Good morning, 7:42, Friday, June 16th, 2017.
It is Friday, right?
It sure is.
All right.
Yeah. So, by the way, just to show you what kind of week this has been, someone just sent a picture of me wearing frozen headphones from some point earlier this week and just said, hey, I know you got a lot going on, but just remember, we have this. Like, we have this evidence that this happened one time.
You know, I had no idea you were such a fashion plate.
Anyway.
Don't cross me.
Yeah.
Yes. You know what you got to do when you're a dad. Sometimes you do things. What was the line? No matter how big of a man you are, when a 2-year-old hands you a phone, whether it's powered or not, you pick it up and say hello.
Hello.
All right?
That's right.
Anyway, joining us in the studio.
Dads do that. Jean-Paul knows all about that.
Jean-Paul Coussan is here, and it seems like months we have been watching the budget debate. We've been watching the session as it's happened, now the special session. I'll point to this. Yesterday, this is kind of what caught me when we first knew we were going to have you. But the headline of a story in The Advocate, with a majority of Louisiana's GOP-controlled House voting against the chamber's conservative leaders, the legislature appears to be close to approving a budget that will use all of the $29 billion expected to be available in the coming year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that was a little frustrating, but it is part of the process, and we live with the process, and we live to fight another day, and we continue to work with our members because each day we have to come back to each member for a different vote. Mm-hmm. And you never know when you're going to need a vote that you might not have gotten yesterday. Mm-hmm. So you try to be diplomatic with your members, and we've talked about it on the air about how you deal with the inside the rail politics versus the back home politics, and both of them are very important.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm disappointed with the result, but we weren't too far off, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, but there were some principles that we were trying to hold the line on that we actually, weren't able to hold. But we didn't go too far off from where we wanted to be.
So is there something, when you're doing all these compromises, obviously you have people who've been in the legislature, they're career state legislators. You're kind of part of the new crop. Is there a line, to you or even your closest friends or colleagues in the Baton Rouge that you say we will not compromise on this? Like, is there a line for you?
Well, I guess you think back. Now we're going back to our constituents.
Yeah.
We have to represent our districts. Each one of our districts are made up of different folks, different institutions, and different priorities. So everybody has their own priorities from their districts, and we do the best we can to represent them. We might have 60-40 Republican Democrat, 50-50 Republican Democrat, 80-20 Republican Democrat, and so you just never quite know how many folks that people are trying to satisfy back home on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm. So with this, it's going to be a $29 billion budget, right?
29, that's correct.
Okay, so there was so much discussion about let's hold back on $200 million. Then it was kind of like, okay, we'll hold back on $100 million. But then it ended up being $60 million. Am I close to the number there?
Yeah, the frustrating thing was relative to some of the mechanisms about the holdback. I think there was a number that we were trying to figure out what was going to be the compromised number, and then there was a question of what was going to be the mechanism of holding back those funds. Because it hadn't been done before.
Right.
And that's the big issue, is that we were looking at 15 mid-year cuts over the last 9 years, and we were trying to stop the bleeding. Because you don't want to have to come home to your districts and tell your university that we're going to be dealing with another mid-year cut. And really what I heard from many higher ed officials was that just tell us the amount of money that we're going to have up front so that we can budget over a 12-year budget cycle instead of coming back in November and telling them that we're short, or February in a special session and them having to cut on a much shorter time frame. So we were trying to come up with a process where we actually held some money to the side, and if the budget was not short, then they would have some mechanism to actually get appropriated the funds. And if it wasn't short, they already planned for it. It seemed to be a reasonable way to go about things, but we couldn't quite get to the $100 million number, and we couldn't quite get to the mechanism that had a little bit more teeth that many of us wanted, which was more of a shall hold back number versus what we ended up with, which is a request of holdback number.
Right.
Now, we hope that they do, accept the request and make sure that they're not hurt by the shortfall that it looks like historically we're going to see.
So at that point, you would ask, I guess, the media, the folks like us, to then go to these different groups and say, do you have a plan of action? It was requested by the legislature. Well, so do you have a plan of action?
I appreciate you saying that.
No,
we try not to ask the media to do too much because we're not treated too kindly by the media, and I think that goes for many people down in Baton Rouge and in D.C., but I think that we should hold
is it not
folks
our responsibility?
Accountable. We should hold folks accountable.
That now that you guys have done this to request it, and we do have a budget, now it is up to us, who are supposed to be the public watchdogs, to call and verify with these groups, whether it's DHH or Department of Children and Family Services or Corrections. What are you doing, and are you holding back some of this money?
That is part of the process, and we do now have plenty of statements and documents in the budget on record, and it's in the preamble language relative to the holdback, which is important. Last week, the Senate had sent us a resolution. In this case, we are now looking at language in the preamble, which I think is a little stronger than the resolution. Preamble is actually part of the budget relative to, rather than being separate from the budget. So we were moving in the right direction, and we got where we are, and we have a budget that's now on the floor of the Senate. And we don't expect too many changes. And if they were to make changes, then it could kick the entire budget back into conference, where once again we would be back where we were last Thursday, with Cameron hammering it out behind the Representative Henry hammering it out behind the scenes with the Senate leadership.
I do want to ask you, because you did bring up higher education. There have been a lot of columnists that have written, budget folks, even from people outside the state, that have said, in Louisiana, we just have too many four-year universities. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, with so many, I mean, Lincoln Parish has two.
Yeah, and you have an institution, one of the institutions, they said the rate of graduation is 6%.
Well, I think
no business survives that way in the real world.
It's incumbent upon the Board of Regents to come up with some viable solutions. And at the end of the day, this year, higher ed was funded a little bit more than they were funded as of March of the current budget, our last budget year. And so we're going to see what the results are with that full funding, with the full funding of TOPS. And, I don't think that there is a majority of folks in the legislature that is willing to shut down any four-year universities.
There's never going to maybe be any will to do that, even if it is one of the things that might save a whole lot of money.
Yeah,
it's hard to go to a town and say, oh, by the way, we're taking away your university, right?
You just hit the nail on the head. It's not going to be politically feasible. I think there was a move a couple of years ago to do that while we had a Republican governor, and it went nowhere. And now we have a Democrat governor, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But there has been a lot of talk at the legislature relative to holding the Board of Regents accountable with plans to show the viability of some of these smaller universities that could be merged into nearby universities. And I think that's what we need to do, is keep holding them accountable, look at the graduation rates, look at the type of students that are going through those schools when you look at the graduation rates, and look at where the TOPS dollars are flowing, because that's going to tell you where the kids think are the best opportunities to get an education and a good job.
I'm very curious quickly. The editor of the local newspaper, the Daily Advertiser, came out saying that y'all need to change that leadership up in the House. Taylor Balrye's doing an awful job. He's not doing a good job. Do you agree or disagree?
I totally disagree. He's been a steady hand at the helm of the ship during a very tumultuous couple of years in the Capitol. He wasn't someone that asked for this leadership, but when it was thrust upon him, he has stood up, and he has fostered an environment of collegiality in the legislature, and there are those who want to break that down. There are people who have come into our legislative house and tried to disrupt things, but Taylor stands up there, and he has Democrat chairman, he has Republican chairman. He lets Democrats speak their mind and does not try to cut them off. He's got Republicans that speak their mind and does not let them, lets them finish their thoughts. So he gives everybody the chance, and then he actually abides by the rules and the procedures. Because what are we without the rule of law or the rule of procedure on the House floor? Now, there are questions about, the rulings, but the fact is that we have rules and that we have to abide by them.
Okay, how frustrated are you with the governor? Because the governor comes in with this tax idea for gas. He comes in with this gas tax idea, and he says, okay, this is going to solve our problems with transportation. And then when he doesn't get it, there's no other plan on the table.
Well, we had the cat tax as well. That was the other one that wasn't feasible.
But it was the same situation in both cases. But there was no other idea. Does that frustrate you?
Well, I'd like to see the governor sit down with more of the Republicans, including our Republican leadership, to see.
Is he doing that, do you think, enough?
Well, I could say that I'd like to see him do it more, and I'd like to see him look at some of the opportunities that we have on the budget, because the people have spoken back home. The people wanted us to push through the standstill budget, and we came pretty close. I mean, this is the first time that we changed the conversation about whether or not we're making cuts right now, or whether or not we're just actually not trying to spend everything that the REC has projected to come in. That's a change in the conversation, and that change is really palpable. And when you change the conversation, that really means that the people are being heard back home.
And that's true. But after the cat tax, the governor says right away, well, that's it. I don't have anything else. And the synopsis was, that's it. I don't have anything else, is what the governor basically said. Now, y'all tell those Republicans they need to get to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, there's messaging coming from the governor's office. There's messaging coming from some of the like the coalitions that are behind the governor. And we have to really look at the reality. We have to think back to what the people want. And the people want to hold the line on the spending. And we turned the corner on that.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like the governor's not listening to the people is what I'm trying to say. And I'm trying to figure out, do you agree with that? That he's not listening?
Well, of course I don't agree with it. No, I want the governor to listen more to the people, and I want him to listen to both sides of the aisle from the people. I want him to listen to Lafayette just like he listens to New Orleans. And I don't think we're there yet. But
are we making progress?
I believe we're making progress.
Okay.
I believe we're making progress in that I can see that the message has changed a little bit out of the media.
Okay.
Because if we were still talking about cutting right now, just because we're not giving the governor exactly what he wants on the budget, then his message might be getting through a little bit more. But in reality, we're here, even the media, I'm talking even the Advocate, and NOLA.com, even they are starting to say that we're actually just not spending what the REC has projected. And I think that's a messaging
it's a major
win.
Shift.
It's a major shift. And so hopefully the governor is seeing that shift, and he will subtly move to where we want him to be on the spending side of things. We know where he is on the taxing side of things. We want to see where he is on the spending side of things.
Okay, and real quick, kind of curious too, is the media not fair to Republicans in the state?
I mean, fair is that's.
Well, you're saying they're kind of changing the tune a little bit. They're understanding more. I mean, would you say they're unfair or fair, or can you not really? Is that not a fair assessment to ask if they're fair?
Well, I think I give
Boy, that was a lot of double talk, wasn't it?
I give this speech to kids all the time when I'm giving speeches to kids. I ask them to read all of the newspapers, all of the print journalism, all of the social media.
Which is what
I want you to digest everything. I want you to look for the loaded terms. I want you to see where they might be coming from, even if it's supposed to be objective. And once you see all of the different journalism, from social media to print journalism, then you can see how different journalists use different words, and they really have subtly different beliefs. And you could read into that. So I think that we can continue to change the conversation. We can start talking about the spending side of things. I mean, we're talking about, we talk about the spending side of things. Next year, we're going to be back on the taxes being the main conversation. But we had a subtle shift this year about how to view the executive budget, which is the one the governor puts out in January, versus what the House actually puts through as HB1. And that's a big conversation change. So I'd actually ask everybody, read as much as you can, listen to as much as you can, and then make your own opinion. I know what's the truth on the House floor, and we know what the numbers are. We sit here for 6 months looking at spreadsheets, so it's kind of hard to distill, when you're just trying to explain it in a 30-minute segment. But you have a lot of meaningful information that you can digest, and some people have asked me to come to Baton Rouge and fight. People have asked me to come to Baton Rouge and make the best deal we can for our district. But I haven't had anybody come to tell me to roll over and do what the governor says or roll over and do what the Senate says. That's not the job that we were hired to do in the House of Representatives.
We are wrapping up with Jean-Paul Coussan. You're our representative in Baton Rouge. I just have one question. What level of confidence should voters have in this area that we're not in the same exact situation, having the same exact conversation with you 12 months from now? I mean, are we making strides to prevent this, or is this another stopgap just to get us to the next budget year?
The budget that we just passed is going to lead to an announcement that our next year fiscal cliff, is what they're calling it, is going to be up to about $1.6 billion. So we did not do what we needed to do to start moving the fiscal cliff in the right direction. And that's the most frustrating part about this budget.
You want government, and the House Republicans want government to cut spending.
We could have, this year's budget is now, based upon what was just approved this week, is $300 million more than last year's budget as of March of this year. So that's a number that we were trying to get closer to the standstill budget. We've been messaging the standstill budget. We went a little bit over and above the standstill budget, but we didn't go up to what the executive budget had requested.
Right.
So, because the RAC numbers just have not come in, so we knew that we should not go up to those full numbers. Jean-Paul
Coussan, it's been a great eye-opening, honestly, just to see the process and hear how it is from your perspective. So we appreciate you coming by. As always, you're always welcome here. And our phone works too. Sometimes when it's not raining outside, the phone works as well.
Yeah, sometimes.
Thanks for coming by. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're here at the top of the hour. Coming up, Todd Starnes and Bernie has news, weather, and